Imagine a war that drags on for 10 years, an entire decade of bloodshed, heartbreak, and endless waiting. Every sunrise brings new hope, but also new sorrow, as the conflict stretches on with no end in sight. The greatest armies of the ancient world, the Achaeans and the Trojans, are locked in a relentless struggle outside the mighty city of Troy. Day after day, the clang of swords and the cries of warriors echo across the plains. The Greeks, far from home, are exhausted and desperate. Their armor is battered, their spirits worn thin. The Trojans, though safe behind their legendary walls, are equally weary, haunted by the fear that the next attack could be their last. One morning, the Trojans awakened to a shocking sight. The Greek camp is deserted. Their ships vanished, as if swept away by the gods themselves. The battlefield, once alive with chaos, now lies eerily silent. All that remains is a colossal wooden horse, standing silent on the shore. Its size and craftsmanship are unlike anything the Trojans have ever seen, and it seems to radiate both awe and unease. For years, the Greeks had tried everything: battles, sieges, legendary duels. But Troy's walls, said to be built by the gods, held strong. No amount of force or heroism could break their defenses. The sudden Greek departure feels like a miracle. The Trojans believe the war is finally over. Joy erupts in the city as families reunite and hope returns to their hearts. Yet the horse is a mystery. Some Trojans are suspicious, fearing a trick from cunning Odysseus, whose reputation for cleverness is legendary. Whispers of doubt ripple through the crowd. Others see it as a sacred offering to the gods, a token of peace and surrender. They urge the city to accept the gift, believing it marks the end of their suffering. The city's fate now hangs on a single decision: what to do with the horse. Should they destroy it, leave it, or bring it inside their walls as a symbol of victory? The story of the Trojan horse is more than a tale of war. It's a lesson in deception, pride, and the power of cunning over brute force. It shows how a single moment of trust can change the course of history. The Greeks, unable to win by strength, chose to win by wit. Their patience and creativity would become legendary, echoing through the ages. They understood their enemies' beliefs and weaknesses, crafting a plan that targeted the minds of the Trojans. Every detail was carefully considered, every risk weighed. The horse was not just a gift, it was a test of faith and judgment. Would the Trojans trust their instincts, or let hope cloud their reason? The Greeks preyed on the Trojans' relief and piety, turning their own hopes into weapons. The city's joy blinded them to the danger lurking within. In the end, the greatest threat to Troy was not outside its walls, but within the hearts of its people. Their longing for peace made them vulnerable to deception. The fate of a city and the legacy of a war would be decided by a single, silent monument. The wooden horse stood as both a symbol of hope and a harbinger of doom. The lesson: never underestimate the power of a clever idea. Sometimes the sharpest weapon is the mind, not the sword. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you invite inside. In the end, it was not the strength of arms, but the subtlety of thought that brought Troy to its knees. The roots of this legendary war trace back not to a battlefield, but to a lavish wedding feast, an event meant to unite, not divide. Eris, the goddess of discord, was the only deity not invited. In her anger, she crashed the celebration and tossed a golden apple into the crowd, inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." Instantly, three powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each claimed the apple, igniting a fierce rivalry that would echo through the ages. Unable to choose between them, Zeus, king of the gods, appointed Paris, a young Trojan prince known for his fairness, to judge the contest. Each goddess tried to sway Paris with a tempting bribe. Hera promised him immense power and dominion over all of Asia. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle. But Aphrodite offered something even more irresistible: the love of Helen, the world's most beautiful woman who was already married to Menelaus, the powerful king of Sparta. Paris, swayed by desire, chose Aphrodite as the fairest, handing her the golden apple and unknowingly sealing the fate of his city. With Aphrodite's divine assistance, Paris journeyed to Sparta, seduced Helen, and brought her back to Troy, sparking outrage across Greece. This brazen act enraged Menelaus and shattered the sacred laws of hospitality, an unforgivable insult in the ancient world. Menelaus called upon his brother Agamemnon and invoked the solemn oath sworn by all of Helen's former suitors, binding them to defend her marriage at any cost. the greatest heroes of Greece answered the call, assembling a vast fleet and launching 1,000 ships to reclaim Helen and punish the city of Troy. But the war was never just about Helen. It became a struggle for honor, pride, vengeance, and the will of the gods themselves. A single impulsive choice, born from desire and divine rivalry, set the stage for a decade of destruction and suffering. The quarrel of the gods became a tragedy for mortals, forever changing the fate of Troy and echoing through history as a cautionary tale. The Greeks arrived at Troy expecting a quick victory, but the city's defenses proved unbreakable. For 9 years, the war became a brutal stalemate. Greeks held the beaches, Trojans defended their walls. Skirmishes, raids, and duels replaced decisive battles. The Greeks suffered from disease, infighting, and homesickness. The Trojans endured hunger and fear. Achilles' feud with Agamemnon nearly broke the Greek army, while the Trojans mourned their own mounting losses. Both sides were worn down, their hopes fading. The war became a test of endurance, not just strength. Inside Troy, some began to question if returning Helen was the only way to end the suffering. The cause of the war was forgotten. Survival became everything. The siege dragged on with no end in sight. The city's fate hung in the balance, waiting for a breakthrough. Troy's walls were its greatest defense. Legend said they were built by Apollo and Poseidon. High, thick, and smooth, they defied every Greek assault and siege engine. The city's strategic location made it a hub of wealth and power, able to withstand a long siege. Hector, Troy's champion, inspired hope and courage, holding the Greeks at bay. His duel with Ajax ended in a draw, symbolizing the deadlock. But the tide turned when Hector killed Patroclus, drawing Achilles back into battle. Achilles' return led to Hector's death, a devastating blow to Troy's morale. Even with their mighty walls, the Trojans felt doom closing in. The Greeks had lost their greatest hero, but Troy had lost its heart. The city's defenses were still strong, but its spirit was broken. The end was approaching, and the Greeks needed a new plan. With Hector and Achilles gone, the war dragged on, hope fading for both sides. The once glorious armies of Greece and Troy now faced exhaustion, their spirits battered by years of relentless conflict. Each day brought new losses, and the promise of victory seemed to slip further away. In the midst of despair, Odysseus, famed for his cunning and resourcefulness, proposed a radical plan, one that would rely not on brute force, but on clever deception. He urged the Greek leaders to trick the Trojans into opening their gates, suggesting a scheme as daring as it was dangerous. The Greeks would pretend to abandon the siege, burning their camp and sailing away, leaving behind a massive wooden horse as a supposed offering to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. This horse, hollow and imposing, would conceal a select group of warriors within its belly. The plan relied on deception and the Trojans' predictable pride. If the Trojans believed the Greeks had truly given up, their desire for victory and glory would make them vulnerable to trickery. One Greek, Sinon, would stay behind to sell the story that the horse was sacred and must be brought inside for divine protection. Sinon's words would be their only hope of convincing the Trojans to accept the gift. The Greeks were skeptical, but desperation forced their hand. With no other options left, they placed their trust in Odysseus's bold gamble, knowing that failure would mean utter ruin. The fate of the war now rested on a lie, not a sword. For the first time, the outcome would be determined by wit and guile rather than strength and valor. If the Trojans saw through the ruse, all would be lost. The Greeks would have no hope of returning, and Troy would stand unconquered. But if they believed, Troy would fall from within. The city's fate now hung in the balance, teetering between suspicion and trust. The gamble was set. The final act of the war would be decided by wit, not might. As night fell, both armies waited, breathless, for the outcome of this desperate gambit. The Greeks turned to Epeius, a master craftsman, to build the horse. Guided by Athena, Epeius constructed a massive hollow structure from fir trees, large enough to hide elite warriors inside. Its size forced the Trojans to alter their own walls to bring it in, a symbolic act of self-destruction. As the Greeks staged their departure, the horse stood as a silent challenge. Odysseus and his chosen men climbed inside while the rest of the army sailed out of sight. Only Sinon remained, ready to deceive the Trojans. The stage was set for the greatest trick in history. The Trojans gathered around the horse, torn between awe and suspicion. Laocoon, a priest, warned them, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts." He hurled his spear at the horse, but at that moment 2 sea serpents emerged and killed him and his sons. The Trojans saw this as a sign from the gods. Laocoon was punished for desecrating a sacred offering. Sinon, the Greek spy, convinced them the horse would bring divine protection if brought inside. Fear of angering the gods outweighed their doubts. The Trojans decided to accept the horse, believing it was a gift from Athena. The warning had come, but they misread it. Their fate was sealed by their own beliefs. The trap was ready to spring. The Trojans tore down part of their own wall to bring the horse inside, celebrating what they thought was victory. That night, the city erupted in joy, feasting, dancing, and relief after years of war. The horse was decorated and honored as a symbol of peace. As Troy slept, Sinon opened the horse, releasing Odysseus and his warriors. They killed the sentries and opened the gates for the returning Greek army, which had been hiding nearby. The Greeks flooded into the city, catching the Trojans defenseless. The celebration turned to chaos and bloodshed. Troy, unconquered for a decade, fell in a single night. The pride that led them to accept the gift became their undoing. The war's final tragic act had begun. Troy's fall was swift and merciless. Its people slaughtered or enslaved, its city burned to ashes. Even the Greek victors paid a price, angering the gods and suffering on their journeys home. The war left a legacy of sorrow and loss for both sides. For centuries, Troy was thought a myth, until archaeologists uncovered its ruins in modern-day Turkey. The story of the Trojan horse endures as a symbol of cunning and the dangers of misplaced trust. Today, Trojan horse means any hidden threat invited inside. The true lesson: our greatest weaknesses are not in our walls but in our minds. Sometimes the deadliest enemy is the one we welcome ourselves.